All right, everybody, we'll get underway here this morning. Clayton, you want to take roll call, please?
Senator Craigo.
Absent.
Excused.
Excused.
Excuse, Mr. Chairman. Senator Love.
Here.
Senator McEwen.
Here.
Senator Pearson.
Excused. She's on her way.
Chairman Ide.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. All right, everybody in the audience here, we've got two bills to work today. The first bill on our agenda is Senate File 118, Eminent Domain Water Projects. And it looks like we have Senator Hicks up front here to take us through the bill. Go ahead, Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, a pleasure to be here this morning. Just want to walk you through this bill. It's very substantive, but it's very simple in its nature. So, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, this deals with the right of eminent domain, and particularly in our Constitution, there's provision that says anything for canals, ditches, water conveyances, drain ditches, that any entity that operates in that area, dams, reservoirs, has the right of eminent domain under our Constitution, and probably rightfully so. Our founders in this state that set up the Constitution understand the importance of water for all of those purposes, for municipal, agricultural, industrial uses. One thing that I think this committee is probably more aware of than anything else, the right of eminent domain can be the most destructive thing to private property rights that exist. It is literally the power of the government taking private property. And while there's a provision that says you're due compensation, even under the Constitution of the United States, oftentimes it never gets to the real value or the real damage caused by eminent domain. It's usually on appraisal of the land value, not the overall impact or loss of all those other associated property rights with that property. So, Mr. Chairman, this is very specific. It does not remove eminent domain for water projects for anybody, municipalities, counties, roads, special districts. What it does is it sets up, because we have a number of programs that we offer in the state of Wyoming. The Safe Drinking Water, Clean Water Drinking Resolving Fund through SLIB, the water development programs, and a number of programs where we grant to those entities state funds. And it just became apparent to me. And then some of these, and I'll use the example, some of these projects that we fund, we might fund them at 95%. And that 95% can literally be tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in some cases. And under those scenarios, while those districts or those project sponsors have the right of eminent domain, when we're putting 95% of the cost of a project out there, it seems like the legislature ought to shepherd our money and take sure that it meets the full intent of what the legislature was. And so what the bill just contemplates, that if you're going to use state funds for any project, that the state ought to have the opportunity to weigh in whether the use of eminent domain is an appropriate use or not with our money. And so, Mr. Chairman, it just goes into every one of those provisions and statutes that where these entities may have eminent domain. Probably the most substantive portion of this bill deals with water development office and large water projects. So I'll just bring your attention to that. Mr. President, or Mr. Chairman, that's on page 7. If you go down to the bottom of page 7 under 412124, it just provides in there that appropriated funds for any projects from the accounts created by this law in this section, and only after receipt of a recommendation of the Water Development Commission, the legislature shall specify the power of eminent domain be utilized to complete the project for which funds are appropriated. It also brings in, if it is determined after the appropriation is made that the power of eminent domain is needed to complete the project. So we've granted the money, the process is moving forward, and then to actually get the project done, that entity has to use the right of eminent domain. That would have to go back to the commission to come back to the legislature to get that approval. And so, Mr. Chairman, that's the bill. I would stand for any questions. Maybe I didn't do the best job of explaining that provision, but it's if we grant the money, the project moves forward, and then the entity's wants to exercise the right of eminent domain to complete the project, they would have to come back through the commission and the legislature to get the approval to do that. We're talking hundreds of $1 million of state funds. And so it's a safeguard. It's to protect that we are the final authority with our money to make sure that the use of eminent domain is appropriate and proper. So, Mr. Chairman, that's all it does. I would stand for any questions.
Senator Love.
Chairman Hyde, thank you. So it appears that this might create some delay in ongoing projects. So say we've got a project that's already running. It looks like it has the potential to interrupt construction, funding freezes, higher project costs. Is that the case in this bill? Is that its intent when this provision is enacted into it? Is it going to delay? So we've already gone in, we've already got our permit, we've already got our blessing to do this project. And somehow this provision takes effect based on the last 10% of property owners or whatever it is. Does this completely stop all other activity on the project?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not
Go
aware
ahead.
of any where that would occur right now. There's always that potential out there. Historically, I'm not aware of anywhere particularly, and I'm assuming you're talking to the provisions under 41-2, correct, in dealing with the Water Development Commission.
Yeah.
I am not aware of any time in recent history in my 16 years where there was ever the right of eminent domain exercise than any project that was funded.
Okay.
So is the potential out there? Potentially. Likely, very unlikely. I think that the commission and the office has done a really good job, expressing that it's probably not a good idea. It's better to actually negotiate an agreement versus use the right of eminent domain. But I'm not going to prognosticate on what the future is. We always tend to run into a lot. These are very long-term, complicated projects and stuff. And I would hope that this wouldn't hold up any projects. But I do think it sends a message as we move forward that this is just going to be a reasonable expectation that if you apply for these funds and you anticipate early, because so let's think about the process that we're talking about. Typically, there's a level 1 study, what we call a reconnaissance study done, and that's paid 100% by the state. So if you're a municipality, an irrigation district or a special district, and you come in and you apply to water development, there's an application fee. Those level 1 reconnaissance fees kind of just scope out what the issues are and maybe some potential remedies. And then if there look like there's potential remedies or a need for additional work, that goes to a level 2 study. That study narrows down, let's say, the range of alternatives. So we've identified what the issue is. Here's a range of alternatives that might address whether it's water shortages or distribution systems or raw water for cities, where are we going to get it? How big of a pipeline? It starts to narrow that down through that. Again, that's 100% funded by the state of Wyoming through the Water Development Commission. Once it goes through that process and they come back and it looks like we've narrowed down with that range of alternatives and we're kind of now we're going to get into the real engineering and components side of the project. At that point in time, you've narrowed it down, and now we're going to start actually looking at the engineering, the geology, the cost, and some of that stuff. We'll go into, I think it's a level 3, phase 2, which starts to do the preliminary engineering. To get to your point, these take years, and through this whole process, what we're saying now is if once you get to that level 2 and now you're to that level 3, phase 2 that starts to really the preliminary design, you should have identified if you're going to need the right of eminent domain. So I don't anticipate it's going to have any impact on any existing projects right now, but I can't guarantee that. What I do know is this will make it clear through that planning process early on. This is something that the commission and the office and the project sponsors are going to have to start looking at. It should never, ever slow down any future projects because it is now part of the process that will have to be adhered to, and they will look at that. Like I said, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, subsection 2, and now we're at that point in time. You should have identified every place for the most part that could be a potential right of way or a potential area where you may have to use right of eminent domain.
Follow up, Senator.
Yeah, go ahead, Senator Lowe.
Chairman Ide. So then is there a provision in this bill that under ongoing projects that, so we have this gap of projects because it takes years to get them going. Is there a provision in the bill that would allow for current projects who are in the process to continue without the burden of this? So they'd be grandfathered in under their current application versus having to apply this to projects that are already permitted, they're already funded, they're already. And so is there a provision in this bill that allows for that?
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
No, that's a policy decision of the legislature at this point in time is whether we want to capture those projects or not. That's a strict policy decision. Do you want to just do the status quo and allow this to move forward? I don't anticipate it would happen, but I can't guarantee that it wouldn't. But on the other side, that's the policy decision that we have to make is do we want to allow things that have tens of millions of dollars of state money to the ability to exercise the right of eminent domain, or do we want to set a policy and say, no, if you're going to use it, you're going to have to come back. That's the policy decision that we need to grapple with. The other stuff should have no impact going forward because it will be part of the standard planning process identified early. Existing ongoing projects, I know the office has been very cautious about and advising people, do everything you can, don't utilize that right. And part of the reason is if we have a state program and we start allowing the use of eminent domain to 10 people's properties, it jeopardizes every other project out there in the future. So the office and the agency's done a really good job of counseling folks. But to your point, that is the policy issue. This bill does not allow, it's ex post facto in the nature that if there's something ongoing that we have funded that has not gone to construction yet because they're held up because they can't get the easements, and then somebody wants to exercise that right of eminent domain under that provision in the bill, they would have to come back to the legislature to answer your question. But that's the biggest policy issue that I think we need to grapple. Do you let the current process go in those cases, or do you come back and say, no, you're going to have to come back to us if you want to use eminent domain?
Go ahead, Senator Lowe.
Senator Ide, thank you, Chairman. Just as having been in construction for a lot of years, I think about my projects and I get projects permitted, and the moment I drop the permit, and that is the law or the regulatory period with which I start my process, and I will stay under that law or regulatory process throughout the entirety of that project. And that offers some protection to me, my investors, my clients. And so if that's not allowed for in this, then we put at jeopardy anybody that has something going on right now, and it could potentially cost not just the state, but individuals millions of dollars moving forward. And so I'm just wanting to make sure I'm hearing what you're saying correctly.
Go
Yeah,
ahead, Senator.
Mr. Chairman, if that's the only issue, if the only issue that's holding up a project right now is somebody using the right to condemn their neighbor's property, that's the issue that we're facing right now. They could have already used the right of eminent domain. Could have already done that. They have the clear authority to do that under our Constitution and our laws, and they haven't done it. And again, I think our agencies have done a really good job counseling folks. Don't use the right of eminent domain, negotiate, try to come up with a fair solution to that But to your point, Mr. Chairman and Senator Love, those entities could have exercised the right of eminent domain today. And for whatever reason, and I think to the credit of our agency, they've said, let's go in there and try to do a fair negotiation with those people to acquire those easements that are necessary to complete the project. But also I want to make it explicitly clear. This bill, if they decided to move forward, if this passes and they decided to move forward, they could come back and here's where we're at. That project or those projects are probably going to require more funding anyway. So I don't think it's going to slow them up one iota. Because I think we are all aware that because of the delays that have already occurred, there's already been a price escalation factor out there. And I would say it's contemplated already that they're going to have to come back to the legislature and ask for more money to complete some of these projects anyway, because we're talking, $50 to $100 million projects. And so I don't anticipate that this alone, if we adopted it today, would stop or slow down a single project that I'm aware of, knowing where many of these water development projects are currently at on the funding model. They're going to have to come back anyway. So it would be just a clear, now, to your point, we may get to that point and the legislature may say, no, we're not going to allow you to use the right of eminent domain. But just to enact this, I don't think slows down or stops a single project. Because I don't think they can complete any that I'm aware of because they have lacked the adequate funding to do so anyway. So I hope that answers the question,
You
Mr.
good?
Chairman.
One more.
Okay, go ahead, Senator Lowe.
Chairman, I through you. So am I clear in understanding, because we keep focusing on state-funded projects, that this is narrowed down to the idea that it would have to include some portion of state funding in order for this to apply?
Go ahead,
Mr. Chairman,
Senator.
by no means does this impact or impair or diminish or eliminate the right of eminent domain by any district that has that power for ditches, canals, dams, reservoirs, drain ditches. That's explicit in the Constitution. Now, we're not doing anything to take that away. We're just saying if it's our money, we get a say so in it. And if we appropriate the money as the legislature, which is our job, is to write laws and appropriate, but we cannot do that without doing a constitutional amendment. So it does not, if it's 100% one of these special districts or one of these entities and they're not using state money, we have nothing to say about it in the legislature.
Okay. Committee, other questions? Just one quick question. We've got some of the water folks in here. Have we ever done this, or when was the last time we've done eminent domain, maybe on a water project? Do you know any history on that at all?
So,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, in my 16 years in the legislature, I'm not aware of a single instance that we've utilized it. I shouldn't say we as the state, but any of the projects that have been funded, it's just a safeguard going forward.
Sure.
Like I said, I think the agencies have done a very good job to try to make sure that there was a fair negotiation between the parties for that. But again, it's a safeguard.
Thank you, Senator Hicks. That answers it. That's kind of what I wanted to know. Any further questions from the committee? Thank you, Senator.
Yep. Thank you.
Any other testimony on eminent domain water districts in the audience?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I have another committee meeting. If you don't think you need me anymore, I'm going to jump over there.
I think you're probably good to go unless, yeah,
All right.
doesn't look like we have any more testimony, so we'll work the bill and let you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Members of the committee.
We do have testimony. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Different morning this morning than we've had in the last several weeks. Brett Mullane, Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation, sitting in support of this bill. A couple of things I want to point out, at the end of the bill, it states that this doesn't affect projects that are already been funded. Anything that's been funded before July 1st, this bill will have no impact on it. It only impacts those projects that will be funded after July 1st. My organization firmly supports water development. I don't think this is going to have hardly any, if any at all, impact on water development. What this will say is that you have to have your easements. You won't be able to use eminent domain unless you're authorized by the legislature to use it. And we've had testimony throughout my career of lobbying that it's very seldom used. And so I don't know when the last time if ever it's been used in a water project. I also have policy supporting the curtailment of eminent domain. So we support water development, but we also support curtailing the use of eminent domain, which, as Senator Hicks pointed out, a lot of times you don't get full value. You get what somebody else says is full value. You might get agricultural value rather than true value for it. So sitting in support of this bill, some people might think it doesn't do anything. I think it gives the landowners that could be potentially have their property condemned, gives them a little bit more protection. Doesn't eliminate eminent domain. It just puts another safeguard in there that you'll have to come back and get permission from the legislature to be able to use it. So sitting in support of this bill, I would take any questions you or the committee may have for me.
Questions? Yeah, thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Moline. Yeah, you made some good points there. I like that everything else is sort of grandfathered in. If there's an issue, it's just from whenever this bill goes into effect that and I like your comments on further safeguards for the landowners, private property rights, and putting a speed bump so it's a little harder to go after somebody if they want to. So thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman.
Buddy else? Go ahead. Mr. Mead.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Jason Mead, Director of the Wyoming Water Development Office. Since you had the question about has it ever been used through the program, I thought I'd jump up and just try to answer that. I did do a little bit of research. In the last approximately 40 years, I came up with roughly 8 projects where it was discussed as probably part of the negotiations, but I don't have any evidence one way or the other of actually if they went through the proceedings of eminent domain, but I think it was discussed as part of those projects. So I think sponsors, again, use it very in a limited fashion, but don't have the evidence to know if it has actually went through the courts. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions for the director? No, thank you for that research, and that kind of gives you a little perspective on the backdrop and how it's been done in the past. So thank you, Director.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question since I'm up here.
Sure.
The way I read the bill, it would impact projects or sponsors, public entities that have water development account 1, 2, or 3 funding. Is it your interpretation that would also impact any project that would have drinking water SRF funding through state lands because of the 10% match to the capitalization grant that comes from account 1 of the water development program? Would be a question to contemplate. Because those projects also are not just potential loans for some of our municipal projects through the water development program, but also get to projects that deal with water treatment facilities that our program doesn't fund, but that are eligible through the drinking water SRF program through loans and principal forgiveness. So
Interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
welcome.
Questions? Go ahead, Senator Lowe.
So since you bring up account 1 and account 2, and I know we just went through the omnibus bill. So all those projects in account 1 and account 2 that are currently permitted, we're asking for extension on some of them. All that money has been appropriated. Will this impact those projects in the cases in which, like Alkali, where we're still having some easement issues? Will this impact that project?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Love, in regards to Alkali, I think we're far enough down the road on that project. There's been enough discussions, encouragement from our office. And I think the desire for the local community to try to make everything work the best we can. The costs of the easements are obviously going to be more than what a typical project would potentially pay for. Our policy and our general projects, such as if we're putting a transmission pipeline in for a town or doing some work on an irrigation district, would be that the water development program would pay up to the appraised value for easements. If there's a need to pay up above that, or a desire for a city or town, for example, to pay above that to avoid eminent domain, or just because they've had a request, they want to get along well with their neighbors, then that would be on them to pay that additional cost. But again, in the case of Alkali, we've had a lot of discussions with our commission and select water committee about the situation. And I think everybody's agreed that there are some benefits, not only to landowners that don't benefit from the reservoir project, but also just benefits to the watershed and potentially the project itself for looking at this kind of on a watershed approach. In regards to some of the projects in the omnibus bill now that are looking for time extensions, those time extensions are some of them are for the very reason we're talking about, which is having trouble getting easements. I don't know that, this could potentially have an impact on those if they were to have to use that in a conversation on those easements. I'm a little unclear whether that sponsor would need to come back to the legislature to get approval for even to mention that potential power they have. So I can't say yes or no, but there is potential, I suppose. The other thing I would mention just on general projects, when we go through design, that's a level 3. That's when funding is in place for sponsors to actually acquire easements. We don't allow the engineer and the project sponsor to move past 50% design until all those easements are in place. So you're not going to get into a situation on a new project where you get all the way to bidding the project or under construction, and you don't have easements in place, because we wouldn't give them the approval to move forward with bidding the project or even going to 90 or 100% design until they have those easements in place.
Thank you, Director. Appreciate it. Others would like to discuss eminent domain. Go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us who you're with.
Hi, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Ashley Harpstreet. I'm the Executive Director for Wyoming Association of Municipalities. I'm super proud to represent all 99 cities and towns that are the fabric of our state. We serve 68% of the population, but service all 100% of residents, visitors, tourism, businesses that come through our main streets. Mr. Chairman, while the intent may be to increase oversight, we are very concerned about this bill, as it will politicize what is currently a technical, legal, and engineer-driven process. Eminent domain already requires a necessary public purpose and due process. Adding a legislative approval layer means decisions could be delayed or blocked based on politics rather than public safety, engineering need, or water security. We are concerned this bill will still delay for critical water projects, even if it is before that legislative approval can only occur during session. Communities facing water shortages, contamination, infrastructure failure, or urgent replacement needs cannot wait for months for the legislature to convene, as unfortunately water emergencies do not follow the legislative calendar. There is concern that this would undermine our local control. Cities, towns, and water districts already undergo extensive planning, public hearings, and state review through the Water Development Commission. This bill shifts that authority away from the local elected officials and engineers closest to the issue and centralizes it in the legislature, far removed from the community's needs. The bill creates legal and financial uncertainty. If eminent domain authority becomes unpredictable, project financing becomes harder to secure, engineering timelines become unstable, and costs increase due to delays and redesigns. Uncertainty is expensive, and taxpayers ultimately pay for that. I want to highlight a very real practical consequence of Senate File 118. It could force entities to pay more than fair market value for easements and land acquisitions. Eminent domain is not just a tool of last resort, it is a critical part of the negotiation process. Without the ability to rely on it or even to signal that it is available, landowners may hold out for the inflated prices, knowing that the project cannot proceed without legislative approval. Finally, I would ask, is there evidence that Wyoming's existing eminent domain process for water projects is being abused? If so, we want to know, and we would like to work on that. If not, this does add a layer of bureaucracy, delay, and political risk without solving a documented problem. We would, however, like to work through this and have a few suggestions and changes. I'm joined today with our Pinedale Mayor, Matt Murdock, and Riverton City Administrator, Kyle Butterfield, and Shoshone Mayor, Joel Highsmith. Thank you, and we'll stand for questions. We can wait till the end because we have a couple tweaks if you don't mind.
Okay,
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
questions? Go ahead, next speaker.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Matt Murdock. I am, as Ashley said, the mayor of Pinedale, as well as the president of the Wyoming Association of Municipalities. I'm looking at it. The core Senate File 118 requires legislature to separately approve the use of eminent domain for water project receiving funding from the state's water development accounts. Even after review, as Ashley said, and recommendation by the Water Development Commission, the project could not proceed if eminent domain is later determined necessary unless the legislature authorizes it in a subsequent session. I will say eminent domain is the last resort. We've had a couple instances in Pinedale where we've looked at a situation and we've wanted to avoid it, and we've worked very hard to avoid it because we respect property owners' rights. It's already one of the most regulated powers in Wyoming law. It requires necessity, a clearly defined public purpose, notice, due process, and judicial oversight. Courts ultimately determine whether the taking is lawful. Senate File 118 does not strengthen those protections and inserts an additional legislative layer to what is currently a technical, fact-based, and legally supervised process. If the concerns before the committee is the protection of landowners, there is actually a more targeted approach available. Rather than requiring legislative pre-approval, the bill could be amended to incorporate enhanced procedural protections similar to those that are being outlined in House Bill 11, the Landowner's Bill of Rights. Specifically, for example, the water development sponsors using state funds could be required to provide a written landowner rights brochure at first notice of potential condemnation, supply a certified appraisal and written settlement offer, a document good faith negotiation for a defined period prior to filing, and finally obtain a formal finding from the Water Development Commission that public necessity exists and that the project location minimizes private injury. Transparency reporting to the appropriate interim committee could also be required without requiring subsequent legislative approval. These measures would directly strengthen due process while preserving timely project delivery. For those reasons, I respectfully urge the committee to oppose Senate File 118 as drafted or amend it in a manner that strengthens the landowner protections without creating a legislative bottleneck or unessential water infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murdock. Questions from the committee? Senator Love.
Chairman, through you. So this is driving legislative oversight that you've mentioned. So because the legislature only meets once a year, if a project runs into this, I know Wheatland just had an emergency where they had to get a water tower repaired, some of those things. If any of that involved other easements that couldn't be required, couldn't be acquired in a timely manner, this would prohibit something of that nature is what I hear. And then, and so that kind of helps me think through the emergency provision of it. Would you consider this though? So if what Senator Hicks had testified to earlier is accurate in that it had to have specific state funding for that project or be out of account 1, account 2, something of that nature. If it is just municipal funding that is being used in this, do you still consider this to delay your project? Because it doesn't require specific state funding. And my understanding is this ties it to funding of that project by the state and oversight by the legislature because of that appropriation.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, through you to Senator Love. That is my reading as well. If there are not state funds involved, then this legislation would not pertain. But I would like to also remind the committee that there are very few water projects going on with the municipalities that don't involve state money. If Pinedale, for example, I'll give this an example, if we had a crisis and it required multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars, not very many communities actually have a reserve that they could tap in and do that. Eminent domain itself would be a very long process, and we'd be looking at increased legal fees. We'd be looking at a lot of fees. The likelihood of state money not being involved is pretty slim. So one time out of 20, maybe not. But I would say probably most times you are going to have a municipality with their hands tied waiting for a legislative session.
Okay.
Senator McEwen.
So if we go through the eminent domain process, how long does that last? What's it take to get through the courts? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do you want to take that?
Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over to Kyle because he might have more understanding, but I can tell you just in Pinedale, for example, we just had a pathway that we were putting in through federal funds. We have been now 11 months in the process of acquiring that piece of property. And we haven't started the eminent domain process just because we were wanting to avoid that. And for that, as I said, the concern that we don't want to step on people's rights. So the process itself can last on, but I'm sure Mr. Butterfield could speak to that specifically.
Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Senator, I'm going to let you down. I don't have a good answer to that question at this time. I would reiterate, though, that eminent domain is something that should be done in a very transparent and thorough manner. Private property rights should be respected. It's one of the cornerstones, I think, of the Constitution of the United States, and for us in Wyoming is one of our values. So going through that process is something that we should use as a last resort. But when it is necessary, I do know that it is a timely process. I would just hate to venture on giving you an estimate of how long that would be.
Go ahead, Senator McEwen.
So what I'm hearing is we want to be able to jump on this right away, but it's still going to take a year or two to get it done. So my question is, we add the extra layer of bureaucracy, as you put it, but there's enough time to add that layer, isn't there? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody want to respond?
Mr. Chairman, through you to Senator. I just did a quick Google search. 12 to 18 months is kind of the average on an eminent domain. I think your point is not incorrect in the sense that, you know, we're not going to decide tomorrow and take somebody's piece of property and get it done before the end of the month. But we have to, you know, even going through that process to start it. So if we had a situation where we had I suspect that there's cases where there could be a crisis, that it could be faster. But I do feel like by having a project moving forward, having to slow down and say, oh, we're looking at eminent domain, legislature's not in session for another 9 months. We're going to have to wait on this and then move into the process. You've now extended the life of that project many more months. Whereas if you follow, if this committee were to take some of the recommendations from House Bill 11, then, you know, in that case, even you could have an interim committee that could hear that, for example, or, you know, you have your landowner brochure and you have a couple of other means to get, so we can get there in a paced, measured, bankable way so that the project can be financed, so that the need can be serviced immediately.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, if I could add, I thought it was very well stated earlier that when the state funds are used, there are different processes that are followed, level 1, level 2, and level 3. And I think it is in the best interest of every party involved that is a thorough process, and any private properties that are identified that need to be secured through an easement or as a last resort eminent domain, that should be identified early into the project. In my mind, the question is less about timing and more about politicizing a process that should be technical. Water is the lifeblood of our communities. Economic development doesn't happen without water. Ranching, agriculture doesn't happen without water. And even our housing needs don't happen without water. So we should be very thoughtful as we provide water to the residents of the state of Wyoming And I would go back to Ms. Harpstreet's comments about adding a level of bureaucracy to a process that is already well-defined in statute and also is meant to be thorough. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anybody else? Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, Mayor Joel Highsmith,
I'm sorry.
Shawnee.
Could you get that mic maybe just a little bit closer?
Is this one working any better?
That's, yeah, just slide it. Can you slide it forward just a little bit?
Okay.
There you go. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Mayor Joel Highsmith, Shoshone, on the Board of Directors of WHAM. We just did a water project, finishing it up now. We had asset access issues, and it wasn't with private property, but it was with the federal government and even with the tribes. But just to sort of outlay it, we much of this funding will have a time limit that you have to get the project done, or you can lose your funding. To work through all of that, if we'd added another layer, if we were working through something like this, we might run out of time, because level one, going to level two, it was identified that we didn't have our easements that we should have, that we thought we had, and the easements were not in place. Original water tower was put in 1912. They didn't get easements. They did some more work in 1978. They didn't get easements. We reviewed it. We were missing easements, so we moved forward on that through our study. But if we'd have added another layer to a project like that, we had a deadline, or we'd lose funding, and that would be a concern. I'm very concerned about the private landowners getting the proper compensation for their land, and it's not always what an appraiser says the land prays for. But I believe, given the opportunity to negotiate as other people have stated, to negotiate and work that out, no one wants to use eminent domain. But this could add a layer that could be unfair to the municipality or what other agencies moving forward trying to move forward on their water project. That's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, just another question to ponder and think about. And I don't think we're in complete opposition of just how do we come to the table and work together and make sure we're complying. And again, we take private rights, private land rights very serious. But we get this from all angles, right? So we have federal mandates that we have to address, and sometimes, well, most of the time, are using state partners to deliver what unfunded mandates coming down on us, and that might be in a timeline crunch. So just if anything we can do to upfront this and not stop once, and I would think that this probably won't apply to most of us, because I think we're going to do that ahead of time and make sure everything's secure. So this could be a nothing burger for us, but I just don't want to come back to you with unintended consequences and there's a massive water emergency somewhere.
Quick question. Can you just not comply with unfunded federal mandates like we should? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, through you. That was something that came up under Mayor Highsmith's, and going back to the project that I was referencing, it was federal funding, and there were very, very strict mandates. And we're not just talking like DEI mandates, we're talking on timing and how negotiation is done and who can talk to who and when it's done. Very, very strict process. Now, albeit that wasn't like a water project, but it can be very complicated, and adding one more step, even to Senator McEwen's point, maybe it's not overburdensome. It could actually cause. So I don't have all the answers on that, but I do think it's well worth looking into, because of my one particular project, we spent easily 6 months just dealing with the federal requirements to get this piece of property, even on what that price could be sold for. So it is a little complicated. And to answer your question a little bit more directly, we try to where we can.
Good. Anybody else? Senator Love?
So hearing the conversation, is there a possible amendment that could be made to this bill that would allow for committee oversight? So you at least have quarterly meetings instead of annual gatherings. Is that something that people would be willing to work through?
Chairman, we're pulling up the bill real quick.
Yeah. So Mr. Chairman, through you, to Senator Love, like I said, I was looking at the House Bill 11, and there is the suggestion of having an interim committee that could be a review of that. I forget which line it is in there, transfer return to interim committee. And that could be something that you could have a quarterly meeting and make that available so the decision could be made in that process. If the legislature felt like we want to make certain, and I understand Senator Hicks' concerns, they're legitimate, and I think that's his job. If we could make it so, if that was the compromise, I go back to some of the other things in House Bill 11 that I think are very productive, like the brochure requirement, the good faith purchase, public interest and necessity by the commission. I think there's a few steps that you could put into this bill that would make it probably almost be similar to a mirror bill, and you could even get further along.
Good.
Very good, thank you.
Any other questions, committee? Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. I talked to Hicks about that, actually. Yeah, we'll bring him up.
Good morning.
Go ahead, sir.
Good morning, Mr.
Thank you.
Chair, committee members. Brad Brooks, City of Cheyenne Board of Public Utilities. I'll just add a little. I'll keep it brief because I think what I'd say has already been said. But for the city, I've been with the city almost 30 years. In those 30 years, we have never used eminent domain, just like has been said by others here. It is something we try to stay away from. We take that privilege very seriously when we have to get to that point, but typically we do all we can to do proper appraisals so that when we come in, we are offering a fair price. I also think it doesn't do a lot for us as a utility to get into a project and have those type of issues with property owners. That being said, there is always the ability, just like is shared, that there can be those unique situations where either somebody doesn't like the project, is going to hold out, and that can happen. That has never happened to us though in 28 years. I will share that I think it's a little different when you're building infrastructure in and around a city. We have seen mostly when that happens that most people see it favorable to have water and sewer utilities on their property because it does increase and help their property value, specifically around town. I would say outside of town, and we have several dams and reservoirs, when you're doing that and it's more on remote property, I have seen that people are a little bit more particular in having pipelines cross their grazing property, and they don't like people to access. Typically on accessing though, we typically only do that maybe once, if not or more, a year, because we just want to make sure there's nothing wrong with infrastructure. I guess on this, my biggest concern is what problem are we trying to correct or fix? Has there been an issue? I think as was mentioned by Wham, if there's something that's not working, what are we trying to correct by this change? But I do believe that if you add this one extra having to come back to the legislature, I think that is a delay. And I think any of us in the field and industry know when there's a delay, as Senator Love mentioned in construction business, there is going to be increased costs. I can appreciate what Senator Hicks said. Okay, if there's already going to be increased costs, you're probably going to need to be coming back to the legislature anyways to ask, but I do think it creates an extra burden. So I would just ask that you consider that. I I guess I do like the comment that Senator Love just made. If there's something, because it's a delay, and if there's something that could be done by the legislature where there's a committee that meets more regularly, that maybe it's at most a couple months before you could get an answer, that would be way more favorable than, and at the most having to wait a year before you could get an answer to proceed again. So that's all I wanted to share. I think I would be opposed to the bill, but I think there is some things that we could probably meet together to take care of people's concerns, and appreciate your time. But I just wanted to speak up and give you some real life examples. It's something we try to definitely stay away from, but it is something we always have in our back pocket to use if we need to, but never have had to. So thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions from the committee? Thank you, Mr.
Thanks.
Brooks.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Anybody else? Senator Hicks, would you like to come up and just tell us what you think about the conversation in the last 4 that were up here, or 5?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate it. And I don't want to belabor. I think there's been some points brought up, but I do want to address a couple of them. And one of the things that in the conversation that I find troubling is for the reason of time, that should give us the right to condemn your property. And it comes back to the old saying, you know, poor planning on your part shouldn't constitute a crisis on mine. But what I've heard is the only reason that we should keep eminent domain is because it's time. Again, you're condemning somebody's property. You're taking away their property. And so for the necessity of time, when I said, and I commend the director from the Board of Public Utilities, I think they clearly demonstrate if you do your due diligence and you do your good planning and you work with those folks up. So the whole conversation with Select Water, the last couple meetings specifically pertains to this, as the lack of easements early in the planning process. The due diligence part is something that committee has said we have got to clean up in the program, because we get to these points. We've got a project out there right now. I think it's going on 7 years of extensions on an easement. Now they're looking at using an eminent domain because it deals with another sovereign entity with the state of Wyoming. But the idea that the reason that we should have eminent domain is because it creates an inconvenience for us in time just doesn't resonate with me. And so I think that I would hope the committee would take into considerations that that's not a convenience. The reason we need eminent domain is because I need time for whatever reason and circumstance. A couple other issues I'd like to talk about. You know, it's a critical component in negotiations. Sure it is, because you have the right of eminent domain. If you don't negotiate the way I want you to, I'm going to condemn your property. Now that stacks the deck clearly one side versus the other. What's my options? I don't have the right to refuse your ability to use eminent domain. If anything, we should level the playing field. We should have true fair negotiations to bargain. And I've been here when we redrafted some of the eminent domain stuff, and maybe we need to go back and strengthen that. But at the end of the day, I'm concerned the idea that somehow this politicizes the process. How did you get the very money to begin with from the state of Wyoming? That's called a political process through elected officials. The state government goes through the appropriation. But now it's somehow political if we insert the ability to say, look, that is the political process that got us here. That's the political process. We have 2 functions in the legislature. And that's to write laws and to appropriate money. That's the political process. And so that's what we're talking about doing, is continuing our responsibility to make sure that those funds are deployed to the state the way we think are appropriate in the legislature. I don't disagree with the necessity to maybe have some provision in there that would allow the commission to go ahead. So a suggested amendment, I don't have it drafted up, would say the commission could go ahead and grant that right. That puts the burden back on the agency to acknowledge that and then reports back to the legislature. So it gets away from that 9-month stint that we're out of here, could put that back. I don't know that the agency wants that responsibility. I'll let the director speak for himself, but that's one of the things that we could do, Mr. Chairman. at the end of the day, this deserves the time and the effort to make sure that we fulfill our elected obligation is to protect our constituents from the power of government. And so this is an interesting conversation. I understand the concerns. Time is an essence, but it's also should not be used as an excuse. And so one of the other things that came up is the example, I think Senator Love, you talked about the water tower at Wheatland. Most of those, if not all of those water projects already have easements. And then to my friend, the mayor from Shoshone, Mr. Highsmith, while they may not have had a recorded easement under the laws of the state of Wyoming, he had a prescriptive easement. And so that's been tested a number of times in the Supreme Court. You know, this body adopted many of those a few years ago. So even if it's not recorded, you're most likely have a prescriptive easement if that infrastructure has been there for more than 5 years, then it's been notorious and obvious to the public that it's sit there. So, Mr. Chairman, regardless of the disposition of what the committee decides to do, we need to address this issue. So one of the things that come up and the reason that this bill is before you, and I'm just going to be really blunt, we don't hardly ever see it, but it gets back to the critical component for negotiations. We have a project right now in the state of Wyoming that the state is likely, if we go to constructions, is probably going to put somewhere approximating $70 to $100 million in. And that entity is absolutely an occasion said, we have the right of eminent domain, you're going to negotiate or we're going to condemn. That bothers me. And this is the harm that we're trying to avoid. Now, is this the blunt tool that maybe gets there? Maybe it's not the appropriate tool. But that sent every alarm that I have in my head that we've now set up a situation that we're providing 95% state funding for tens of millions of dollars for one neighbor to condemn his neighbor's property. That's not right, Mr. Chairman. It's absolutely not right. That's not why we have this process to build dams and reservoirs in the state of Wyoming. So one entity made up of a small district can condemn their neighbor's property for their own beneficial use. So that's why this bill is before you.
Thank you.
That is a
Senator Hicks.
real world example, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity.
Appreciate it. Thanks for your rebut to all of the other questions. Committee, I guess, audience, anybody else? I think we got through it all. We'll go ahead and somebody want to move the bill?
I'll move the bill.
I'll second it.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion. Senator Love.
So when would be the right time to make an amendment on this bill?
You know, I'm kind of thinking after you brought that up just a little bit ago, Senator Love, if there's a amendment that hasn't really been worked and thought through, I think probably maybe in a general file or when we introduce the bill or when we bring it up for general file up at the legislature. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Committee of the whole.
Committee of the whole. Thank you, Senator McEwen. Yeah. Seeing no more discussion. Roll call. We'll take vote.
This is a roll call vote for Senate File 118. Senator Crago,
Excused.
Senator Love,
Aye.
Senator McEwen,
Aye.
Senator Pearson,
Aye.
Chairman Ide.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, that is 4 aye and 1 excused.
Okay, thank you, everybody that was here to testify this morning. We'll move on. Let's see, where are we? We're about a little after 9 o'clock. We got one bill left here. I think the good Representative Wharf is going to present here. Federal Mineral Royalties State Share, House HJ 2. Representative Wharf, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm glad to be here with the Ag Committee in the Senate. Appreciate it. I can go through this quickly or we can go through it line by line, however you would prefer.
You,
Okay.
I'll leave it up to you. You do how you want to.
Yeah, I just didn't know if you guys are on a time constraint or
I
anything,
think we've
but,
got time here. It's a
Yeah,
pretty
I
short
think we
bill
got-
here too.
yeah.
So
and it's pretty simple. You know, this comes from, the Select Federal Natural Resource Management Committee, of which both Chairman Ide and I chair that committee. But this really follows a letter that was sent, I believe it was from both the state or the Senate Appropriations Chair and the House Appropriations Chair. I'm not sure that it was by the whole committee, but I know those two people sent a letter to our congressional delegation. We were actually on our way to a meeting that was scheduled for the committee. And I spoke with Senator Co-Chairman Ide, and we were shocked to learn about the letter, but we were also concerned with the response that was given to that letter. They had made a request to change the federal mineral royalties. Currently, we get 50%, and actually it's about 48% the state gets, and the federal government takes about 52% of our mineral royalties. But we mirrored what was requested in the letter by the two chairmen. We requested that the 50% be switched to 87.5%. And that mirrored what was said in the letter. And what we didn't like was the response that we got from our congressional delegation. Wasn't from them, it was from a staffer that basically just said, we'll look into it. We discussed that and we thought maybe we needed to send a little bit stronger message. We don't want them just to look into it. We want them to actually do something. And so that's what this is. This is a resolution that is basically telling our congressional delegation that we would like to see a bill move forward in Congress that would do this. This is a heavy lift, but I think it's an important lift. And I'll go through the whereases. I mean, it just says, you know, that currently we get about 46% of the state surface land area is owned by the federal government. Like I said, about 50% of the federal mineral leasing comes back to the state, and it's a significant portion. However, it was something I was unaware of, but Senator Ide pointed out that Alaska gets 90% of their minerals. And I believe it's not on all federal lands in Alaska, but everybody knows about ANWR, right? Everybody heard about that big place. That's where they get 90% of the mineral royalty. So we don't feel it's inappropriate. So what we did in our letter is we pointed out the fact that Alaska gets 90%. Then we asked that in 24, or I guess we state in 24 that Wyoming received $590 million and almost 591. I'll just say it at that. This was largely in response to the One Big Beautiful Bill that there's a lot of discussion about back to our east. The One Big Beautiful Bill, we found out after it passed, it does lower the rate that we get on oil and gas leasing. It lowered it from 16.67% to 12.5%. That reduction was estimated to cost, trying to remember, is it this year? Yeah. In 2026, it was estimated by the Appropriations Committee, and this is what caused them to generate the letter that they sent. But they found out that the Big Beautiful Bill was going to hit us to the tune of about $600,000 this year. If you extrapolate that out until the year 2030, that could actually end up costing the state of Wyoming $4 million. So the One Big Beautiful Bill is One Big Beautiful Bill, but there were some consequences to that. The resolution goes on to say that the Big Beautiful Bill Act reduces federal mineral royalty rate for co-leasing on federal lands from the 12.5% to 7%. That's going to reduce another $50 million annually until 2034. So you can see those are pretty big hits. And I think I'm going to read this paragraph. It's page 3, lines 14 through 18. It says, whereas the reduction in the federal mineral royalty rates will reduce the revenue available for Wyoming's roads, bridges, and highways, kindergarten through grade 12, education, higher education, capital construction, emergency responders, and general operations of the government. Whereas transportation, I'm reading on, this is bottom of 3 and on to 4. It says, whereas transportation, education, emergency response resources are vital to Wyoming and its citizens, we resolve, now let it be resolved by the members of the legislature of the state of Wyoming. And this is where we get specific. Section 1 says that the Wyoming legislature will request that Congress introduce and enact legislation that will increase the state of Wyoming's share of federal mineral royalties from the 50% to the 87.5% that our Appropriations Committee had also requested. And that Section 2 says that the Secretary of State of Wyoming would transmit a copy of this resolution to both the President of the United States, the President of the Senate, Speaker of the House, and that Wyoming's congressional delegation will also get a copy of that letter. And so we're basically reiterating what our chairman of the Appropriations Committee had sent to them. But we're trying, it's our resolution that we want the entire body of both the Senate and the House to step up and say, this isn't an ask. We're saying it needs to happen. And I think we're probably in the best position we've ever been. We've got a friendly administration. I think you can look almost all throughout his cabinet. We have a lot of Wyoming individuals. Our own Senator Barrasso is the number 2 man in the Senate. And we felt like now is the time for us to kind of make that request. We finally have a majority. We could lose that majority the next election. So I do think there's a sense of urgency to get this done. But it would be my hope that your body will also join us in agreeing that this needs to happen. So with that, Mr. Chairman, if there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to address those.
Questions from the committee? Anybody?
And I should say, Senator Love, we've not had a chance to talk, but welcome to the Senate. It's nice to see you and look forward to getting to know you. But welcome to the Senate and the legislature. It's a fun time, Dan.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, Representative Wharf, thank you. Enjoyed working on this with you in the interim on federal natural resources. I couldn't have presented it any better than you just did. So I'll let you go. And thank you for being here to present this.
You bet, Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman and members of the Ag Committee. I appreciate your time.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
I'll sit around.
Yeah,
there's
if you
any
would, and
questions
see if
that come up.
anybody wants to
Thank you.
comment on it. It's like we've got, come on up.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Ryan McConaughey with the Petroleum Association of Wyoming. Just wanted to come up real quick, say we do support this resolution. One thing that I would comment on page 1, starting on line 6, with the whereas statement talking about the percentage of federal land ownership at 46%. I also think it's important to note that the federal subsurface leasing mineral estate is actually closer to 65% federally owned. So I think it's a bigger issue than just the land ownership. But I think that was important to point out. And then also support this bill, but may want to take a look at how this interacts with House Joint Resolution 2, which brings federal mineral leasing to the state, or asks the federal government to allow the state to manage that. That one, prior to committee in the House, did not have anything to do with changing the rate, the mineral severance rate. It now includes, Senate Joint Resolution 1 that you all passed out of the Senate now includes bringing the 2% back. So these two resolutions have a different severance rate that we would ask for. So might just be worth some consideration.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So
and
those are good comments. Yeah, I think last time I checked on the federal subsurface ownership of all of our land, it was last year when I ran another bill, but I think it was over 69% actually.
It could be closer to that, sir.
Yeah. And yeah, your comments, and I know what you're talking about on that Joint Resolution 1. And we kind of worked that last paragraph, but it does still have that 2%. And tell me if I'm wrong here, that would still apply here though, even though we're saying, because right now it says 50% and we're getting that 2% fee taken out of that. So we essentially get 48 the way it is right now. Is that correct?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. So technically Wyoming gets 50% of the severance, but then they hold a 2% administrative fee to administer the program. And then in Senate Minerals, they amended that resolution to ask for that 2% back in exchange for the state of Wyoming administering the program. We can't confirm this for sure, but we believe that 2% represents about $40 million.
Okay. Thank you. Questions from the committee? Thank you, Mr. McConaughey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mr. Moline.
Excuse me, sir. Brett Moline, Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation, sitting in support of this resolution. I do agree with Mr. McConaughey. Whatever wording in the resolutions, they need to be consistent.
Mm-hmm.
So sitting in support of this resolution, but realizing that having two resolutions go forward that ask for different things might be confusing. So would ask that consistency be made, but sitting in support of this resolution, keeping this funding in Wyoming is extremely important for everybody. So sitting in support would take any questions you or the committee may have, sir.
Questions? I've got one real quick. Back to your comments on being consistent with the other joint resolution. You know, we're referencing 50% in here and going to 87.5%. Do you think, or Mr. McConaughey, that we need to address that 2% in here since, you know, we're not taking that out of that other joint resolution. So would it be assumed that we're 50% now with a 2%, we're going to 87.5 and it would still be 2%? Anybody want to comment on that?
Mr. Chairman, you're getting a little bit out of my wheelhouse, but I believe how to say this, the goal is to get as much as we can, but I believe, the consistency is going to be important. Getting that 2%, if it needs to be outlined, Mr. McConaughey can probably answer this question much better than me. So
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Mr. Moline and I are on the same page. It's just whether or not we're asking for in Senate Joint Resolution 1, we're asking for basically the state's share to be 50%. And then in House Joint Resolution 2 here, we're asking for 87%. So I think if we send both of those letters, it could cause some confusion on what the state is actually asking for.
You know, we did make an amendment to that joint resolution number 1, and we took out that existing,
Right.
the word existing. So if this does change, And that was a little bit of the debate. That's why we amended that. So if the share does change, it's not referencing the existing when that passes, which is 50%.
Sure.
So do you have a suggestion on what you do with that 2%, or what would you suggest?
Ooh, that's a that's a good question, Chairman. I would have to look a little bit further at that. I think in Senate Joint Resolution 1, the idea was to ask for that 2% back because the state would be managing that. I think it's important to make sure that we have that money available because there will be a cost to the state to manage that mineral leasing program. Obviously, if this one were to go forward and we see the rate go much higher for the state's dollars, I think that could also address those issues as well. So, I really think probably for you all, it's a policy decision on what you think is most beneficial to the state. But I just think that there might need to be a little bit of consistency there, and maybe we can just look at that and get that sorted out.
Thank you. No, that's good information. Go ahead,
Well,
Mr.
Mr.
Muller.
Chairman, while Mr. McConaughey's here, it could be worded that at the minimum, we ask for 2%, the administrative feedback, but we would prefer going to 87%. I mean, it could, depending on what wording you want, just as long as the message in both resolutions are consistent.
Yeah. One more quick question. What did you say that dollar amount was on the 2%?
It was stated by somebody in Senate Minerals, I can't remember who it was, but that the 2% represented about $40 million.
About 40 million. Thank you. That's a big number.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, go ahead.
If I may.
Representative Worf?
In listening to the conversation, I'm wondering if what we should do is add to this that in the event that we're moved up to the 87.5%, that would include the state of Wyoming could manage the resources at that level. And I think that kind of covers them both. Maybe we need to put a statement in there about with Wyoming taking over the management, it could all be absolved with the 87.5%. To me, that's saying that, the one letter saying if we could get 40, move the 48 to actually 50. But if this one goes through, we would still be assuming the management, because I think that's what we're saying is that should it go to the 87.5%, the state's still going to want to manage that. That's what we're asking for in the other letter. The 2% to me becomes irrelevant because instead of going to 50%, we would be going to 87.5. And so maybe we just need to put a statement in there, based on the assumption that, and I don't really want to refer to the Senate Joint Resolution 1, but maybe we just need to put a statement in there that says that would cover the management. If Wyoming were to do that, we could manage the resources here. That makes sense.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I think that makes sense, from our members' perspective versus the state. The idea of the state managing the program is a bigger deal and provides more consistency to the oil and gas producers in the state of Wyoming. And so I think for us, that would definitely make sense.
Questions? Do you have either one of you, while we have you up here, do you have a simple amendment that we could add to this right now to clarify that?
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I don't have Senate Joint Resolution 1 with me, but I would say, and I don't know if LSO can do that for us, if they can't just pull out of Senate Joint Resolution 1, the component where it says that the state would assume management authority over the leasing, and I can't remember the exact language, but leasing and bidding, I think, or something along those lines.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would have to look. I took my computer back with me when I sat back down, but it was changed a little bit in the Senate Minerals Committee to provide more of like a cooperative agreement language. And so that's, I think it's fairly lengthy now, but we could certainly look at how to incorporate that into this resolution.
That would be, so that Senate joint resolution is headed to minerals in the House. So would you suggest maybe getting, one of us on the committee could get with minerals and talk to them about making that amendment in minerals on that joint resolution so these two mesh together?
You know, Mr. Chairman, I think it might be worth having a conversation with the chairman of minerals and,
Yeah.
and seeing what the best path for
Okay,
getting these in alignment would make sense.
very good. Thank you. Other questions?
So I've got that language.
Do you?
Yeah.
Why don't you share that with us just so you guys can hear it while we're here? It's that last paragraph kind of on that.
Chairman,
thing.
yes. Thank you. Through you. So section 1, paragraph 5 of Senate Joint Resolution 1, provide for the revenue distribution consistent with federal statutory formulas, provides that the mineral resource developed and land designated under a cooperative agreement with the state of Wyoming, the 2% administrative cost reduction authorized under 30 USC section 191B shall be allocated to and retained by the state of Wyoming in lieu of retention by the United States government. And so really, I think we can take that very last piece. So probably just insert that entire paragraph into the other and maybe be able to say upon adoption of the resolution, this paragraph would not apply if this was the mechanism or the horse that went forward.
Yeah, I kind of hate to, just a quick comment, Senator Love, not to debate this right here, but to tie the two together, I think they almost need to be standalone. Go ahead, Representative Orr.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Love, I think that's a great catch, but I think I would just leave it at that. Just make the statement that we'd entered, because that's what we're doing, is reiterating what we agreed to. And I would just say, don't mention the 2%, because 2% is totally irrelevant. Just mention that with the cooperative agreement, the state would assume all that, make it that we're doing all that, because obviously it's better than 2% to go to 87.5%. But it also, I want to leave that window open, because we're asking our congressional delegation to actually introduce legislation. It's gonna be hard to do. But I kind of defer to them. I mean, if they think that the 2%'s good enough getting the management authority, that may be a bigger gain for us than the 87.5%. But I would like to leave that option available. And I think maybe by doing that, they should be able to understand that we're asking for both, that the key is that there would be a cooperative, an agreement that either we get the 2% or we go to 87.5.
Anybody want to chime in on that? Okay,
Well, Mr. Chairman.
yeah, go ahead.
I mean, it does seem to me, in my simplistic mind, that they are a little bit, the two resolutions are a little bit in conflict with each other. So I don't know if because one's asking for 87% of the
87.5, yeah.
87.5%. But if I remember right, this resolution is silent on the cooperative agreement, where the other one is asking for 2%, but we want to have the state of Wyoming management, which we fully support, rather have state management than federal management. But it seemed like to me that they're similar, but in conflict, and consistency in a request is important.
Mhm.
I can't sit here and tell you the best way to, yeah, we want, to have one resolution that combines both ideas, we want 87% and management. Would, to me, be the simplest, which would incorporate both resolutions. But
Well-
that takes two down to one.
Go ahead, Senator McEwen.
I think another way to simplify this is just put in this resolution that we want control over it. Don't necessarily reference the 2%, but say we want the state to have control over the leases and the bidding and stuff.
Yeah,
And I
Mr.
think
Chairman,
that will bring them closer together.
that's what I think's lacking. We probably should have said something in this resolution that is something that the state would assume is that role and fulfill that duty. And so I look at that, I think capturing that paragraph that Senator Love read, I think you could put that in, because that is where it talks about, that we'd be in communication with the local governments, that it would be kind of a cooperative role that we would be playing, because that is the intent. And I think we probably just assumed that was a given in conversation that I remember. I mean, but we didn't marry those two, but that's what's lacking. We should say something about that. What we're proposing would also entail the state taking over and assuming management responsibilities in cooperation with the federal government. I mean, that's kind of how it's worded.
The other thing I would
Go ahead.
emphasize, I think we definitely need to get together with the minerals chairman and kind of clean it up. I don't think it's gonna be that hard to do, but
The wording's all right here.
yeah, I think we need to get buy-in on both committees.
Thank you, Senator McEwen. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's just important to realize, I think these were both completely separate prior to adding that 2% in. So I think that's where kind of in the beginning, they were two separate subjects, and then the work that the Senate did in those, I think has where this has come about. And so I would agree that getting some consistency between the two would be helpful.
Very good. Yeah, Senator McEwen, I think that's Representative Wharf, we can get together with LSO maybe and hold the two next to each other and say, here's where the problems are. This is what we want to do.
Yeah,
And take that to minerals on the bill that's going over there. So,
Mr. Chairman, that's what I think I would do.
Okay.
is, have LSO look at Senate Joint Resolution 1 and capture the component, because that's what's lacking. And that way it's still covered, and it's probably a little more clear that we are talking that if we get the 87.5, that's on the assumption that the state's going to be doing what we proposed in Senate Joint Resolution 1. And
Okay.
I think they could do that.
thanks, Clay. Senator Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So do we need to add an amendment on this bill to make it consistent with that, or LSO is just going to see, kind of compare the two to make things consistent and suggest an amendment for both? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, if you were to provide a specific amendment, I would be able to relay that to the attorneys. However, instead, I could also simply indicate to the attorneys that this is a concern for the committee, just to put it on their radar. And so should a member of the committee come to the drafting attorneys later with an amendment for committee of the whole, they would have a little bit of heads up. So I could at least communicate the committee's interest, even if an amendment were not necessarily to be passed at this time.
Okay. Senator or Representative Wharf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I mean, I would say that, and don't want to speak for the committee, for your chairmanship, but I look at it, I think the concept's there. I think you can, I know in the House or the lower chamber, however we have to say it here, I think we say the House here. But, you know, we do that a lot where we say that's the concept, we're going to go and have LSO draft that and put that in. You guys in the upper chamber, you may not like to do that, but that's the concepts there. That way you can move it forward. LSO can draft that verbiage. And then when it's introduced to the committee, the committee can say this was the amendment, because I think it's clear what the intent is. And if it's not, I'll reiterate it. It's to incorporate that partisan joint resolution 1 that says the state would assume management or enter into a cooperative agreement with the federal government to manage the federal lands as we lease the royalties here. And I think that's a concept that we all agree with. And I would assume that's something that you're capable of doing. We just have to get that amendment finalized before you introduce this committee of the whole.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr.
I think we're
Chairman,
kind of, yeah, go ahead, Mr. Moline.
I want to say this while these gentlemen are up here. In my opinion, it either needs to be 2 separate resolutions, one dealing with state cooperative agreement, and then another one that deals with royalty rates. You know, the percentage that the state gets back, or we marry it into one that mentions state control along with the increase in the percentage. Either 2 separate ideas that are very distinct, that one's management, one's the percentage, or we marry it together so we have one. That's my suggestion. I would suggest keeping this resolution active, so moving it out of committee to keep it going. We've got time. We can work on this with both chambers, with the industries, to come up with 1 or 2 good products, deciding, whichever way you folks decide to go.
Sure.
That's my thought, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Moline. Committee. Okay, we'll take all of that and see if we can get it right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, gents. Yeah, appreciate it. You bet. All right, committee, any further testimony? Seeing none. It's been moved by Senator Love,
I'll second it.
seconded by Senator McEwen. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman. through
Go
you.
ahead, Senator Love.
Yep, I like the comments and the discussion that was had on this. It seems that we either need to let both horses run their race and make sure they're distinctly different, or we need to come up with a product of the 2 that will allow it to stand. So as we work through that on the amendments, I'd be glad to join in that process.
Very good. Thank you. Go ahead, Senator McEwen.
I think I tend to believe we should marry them together and do one. I think we'll have a better chance of getting it through instead of 2. For what that's worth.
Let me ask you a question. I guess we should, we moved and seconded the bill. So if marry the 2 joint resolutions together as one joint resolution is what you're saying, I assume. And where would that happen with this bill or the one going over that's in minerals over in the House right now?
I think it would be easier to bring the local control and that into this bill than take this bill into that one.
Interesting. Okay, any further discussion? The only other amendment, I think, and we can maybe do that one, we're working on that, the comment from Mr. McConaughey on referencing the subsurface mineral estate owned by the federal government. I think that's important to add on page 1 where it says 40% of the surface area, and it should say, and 69% of the subsurface area is owned by, and it should say approximately on that as well too. I think it's 69 and some change, and I don't know if that's changed the last year or so. But I guess we can probably make that amendment here right now, and I would move that amendment.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Go ahead, Clayton.
Mr. Chairman, can you repeat that amendment one more time?
Yes, I think, and you can perfect on it as you put it in there, but I think it, on line 6, it says, whereas in Wyoming, approximately 46% of the surface area and 69% of the subsurface, I'm trying to remember the language of the other one, subsurface resources is owned by the federal government.
Is that language from the other resolution, the Senate resolution?
No, it's from a bill last year. I can probably find that here. There's a resolution last year. I'll read it to you here if we have time, if you guys want to wait here a second. Let's see, 2025. I think I can find it here real quick. Yeah, here we go. I can open this. Yeah, what does it say in here? Yeah, here's the language. Whereas more than 46% of the surface and more than 69% of the subsurface resources of the state of Wyoming. I think that's what you need right there.
So to clarify, and which resolutions, can you read the number?
Yeah, it was, let's see, Joint Resolution 2, 2025 in last year. And it's on, yeah, let's see which paragraph. These aren't numbered. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8th paragraph down.
And you're simply, from that resolution, you're simply inserting the language and more than 69% of the subsurface resources of the state of Wyoming.
Correct.
And you're inserting that after the surface land area.
Correct.
So just one more, just to read out, it will read approximately 46% of the surface land area and more than 69% of the subsurface resources of the state of Wyoming is owned by the federal government. Is that correct, Mr. Chairman?
Correct. And if you want to look at that other paragraph, I mean, it would simplify probably if you just put more than 46% of the surface and more than 69% of the subsurface resources of the state of Wyoming is owned by the federal government.
That's what I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we're good.
And I will tell the drafting attorneys where that language comes
Okay,
from.
thank you.
Thank you.
Further discussion on the amendment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion, the amendment passes. Back on the bill. Any further amendments? Senator Lowe.
I might have the amendment to do what was requested in helping marry this. That amendment would read something like, whereas the Wyoming legislature requests that Congress enact legislation amending the Federal Mineral Royalty Act to authorize the United States Secretary of Interior to enter into cooperative agreement with the state of Wyoming, under which the state may, at its election, and subject to federal approval, assume administrative primacy for the mineral leasing on specified federal lands located within Wyoming.
Representative Worf, you have any comments on that? Before you come up, that's referencing federal leasing though, and not the shared mineral royalties.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate Senator Love trying to put that together. You know, I was just looking at some of the changes because it was changed in the Senate quite a bit. I have a little bit of a hard time with the primacy statement. You and I have talked about it. I'm not sure where your committee falls down, but I believe that the minerals belong to us. You know, you look at all the other states that came into the union. And I think that's one of the things important is to talk about how this brings back into federalism. I really think, you know, we first had to learn to crawl, then we had to learn to walk. We're wanting to run. And that's what I told the mineral committee when I presented the bill. But to me, that's one of the things that I don't like the primacy in there, because I do think that there are mineral rights, just like all the other states. For some reason, the western states are forced to share their mineral wealth with the nation. But that's my bias, Mr. Chairman.
So Representative Worf, do you want to wait and work these, look at the one going to minerals and see if we want to marry him or perfect on that language? Are you okay with that, Senator Love?
I am okay. I would just like to clarify what I said though was assume administrative primacy. So not affecting anything other than administration.
Yeah, and it probably will, I mean, that's the only thing, you know, I don't want it to get twisted around to where it's their ability to say that they want to retain that. But I think that we've all got the concept what we want. I think it's just a matter of doing it. And I just don't know how to marry a Senate bill with a House bill.
No, I don't either.
Or resolution, but I'm sure when we talk to LSO, they can help us. But I think that's actually a good idea. The other thing I thought about is, you know, they're kind of two separate things. I would like to see House Resolution 1 incorporate the management authority in consultation with them. I think that's an important thing, but I also look at it, we're kind of leaving it up to our congressional delegation as to what fight they think's the easiest. If they want to fight for both, or if they want to pick one and fight for one. And so, you know, that's one of the things I thought about, because I wrestled with the same thing. I do see that there could be some conflict, but I look at it, I assume our congressional delegation can figure out the best way to move forward. So maybe we are better off to send two separate ones, but incorporate that into the.
Yeah, Representative Worf, I tend to agree with you on that because they may be responsive to the leasing aspect of it, of the state taking over that, because they might want to just wash their hands of that, but might be a bigger fight on the royalty side of it. So I think it's, with your comments, I think we kind of keep them separate. Just maybe we get one and not one go down because they're tied together. So thank you for your comments.
And Mr. Chairman, maybe that's a point that we need to make, is that they are somewhat comparable, but they are different. But that's giving our congressional delegation the latitude to work however they see best to get us to this end goal. I think we want both, but.
So you're good with just working with LSO, get them so they're not conflicting with each other and try to move them out of both chambers?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Representative Ward. Everybody good? Go ahead and go ahead, Representative Worf.
I was going to say, you know, if Mr. Chairman, if Senator Love wants to make that motion to add that, by all means, we can add that, and then we can meet with LSO and see if that satisfies it, or if we need to do some more tweaking, because we may need to pull some more things in. When I was reading that, there's some other things that are included in the Senate Joint Resolution that I would probably like to pull over in addition to what you made, the comments that you brought forward. But I don't think it hurts the bill if you would like to make that motion. I think it might help us when we sit down with LSO to come up with resolution that puts them both together.
Just a quick comment on that. I think this is my personal opinion, that we hold off so we don't get it wrong here in LSO, and then we have to remove that amendment on committee of the whole. Would you agree, Senator? Okay. How about you? You? All right, we ready to vote?
So I
What-
just wanted to confirm, so that amendment, are we withdrawing that amendment from Senator Love?
Ready to vote?
This is a roll call vote for House Joint Resolution 2. Senator Craigo,
Excused.
Senator Love, Senator McEwen,
Aye.
Senator Pearson,
Aye.
Chairman Ide.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, that is 4 aye and 1 excused.
All right, committee, I think we're done. Move to adjourn. So moved. Thank you. And I better go.